Hey friends, it's Brad Page from the I'm in Love with That Song podcast. Now this time I'm taking a minute to share something that's got me pretty fired up. If you listen to the show, you know how much I love music and storytelling. Well, Pantheon Media is doing something special with their latest capital investment raise on Start Engine, and I couldn't resist giving them my 2 cents. The Pantheon team is all about bringing together the heart and soul of music and the stories behind it. They've created a community of podcasters and listeners that truly feels like a family here. By investing in Pantheon, you are not just throwing your money at any old project, you're backing a whole movement that celebrates the art of music. What could be better than that? With this investment, Pantheon is looking to grow even larger and bring us more of those incredible stories and tunes that we love so much. This is a chance for us to be part of something bigger, helping to shine a light on voices that deserve to be heard. So, if you're looking to invest in something special and close to your heart, check out Pantheon Media's campaign on startengine.com/Pantheon Media. That's startengine.com/Pantheon Media. Let's join in and make some beautiful music together. Head on over to startengine.com/Pantheon Media and see how you can be part of this great journey. Thanks for listening, and let's keep this music alive.
This is Kathy Valentine. I'm from the Go-Go's, and you're listening to Holly and Dave on the What Difference Does It Make podcast.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Dave.
What's going on? How are you today?
Well, I am absolutely thrilled. We have an interview today. I am beyond excited to welcome Kathy Valentine to the What Difference Does It Make podcast. I feel like you don't even need an introduction, Kathy, but you know her as the bassist from the Go-Go's, and we now know her as an author of her memoir, which I know we were consuming. Just, we wanted more, but all I ever wanted is the memoir. It's the recent release memoir by Kathy Valentine, formerly of the Go-Go's. Welcome, Kathy. Welcome to the What Difference Does It Make podcast.
Thank you. And the only word I would X out is formerly. The band is still active and has a documentary coming out.
We will happily cross out that formerly. It's great that the band is back together, right? It's all 5 of you, right?
Yes. 2018 marked the first shows that I had done with the band in a while, and we came back in a big way with 4 big nights at the Hollywood Bowl with the LA Philharmonic. The only thing that was wrong with those shows was that Gina Schock, our drummer, she couldn't put it off. She had to have neck surgery. So we had a substitute drummer. So that kind of sucked, but it was still awesome. Then we did spend a year, like kind of just talking about doing the documentary. But it will be on Showtime. There was going to be a theatrical release. So that's a drag because theatrical releases can be fun. You know, there's premieres, and we were actually going to have a worldwide theatrical partner that I don't know what happened to all that because pandemic.
I feel like I've spent the whole week with you because I've enjoyed. I mean, it's really it's a really well-written memoir. It's crazy because I felt like you were really descriptive of your emotions. They felt really raw. That's why I really enjoyed the book, is just that you were extremely honest with what was going inside your head, which is amazing to me in that this was 40 some odd years ago. Did you keep a diary, or how did you go back to those places, and what was that like?
The book goes from 1970 to 1990. I like people to know it's not the history of the Go-Go's. It encompasses my adolescence, getting infatuated with rock and roll, chasing and determined to achieve success in the music business, moving to LA, then getting in the Go-Go's, our rise, our really wonderful run of 4 or 5 years, and then what it felt like to lose it all. So I did have journals, not every day for years and years, but I had enough to give me some stuff. I filled in blanks with a Filofax, like day planners, that I wrote down stuff by the day. I would stick my backstage pass in, and if I went to a show on that day, I had lots of press. The Go-Go's did tons of press, and I had it all. I had the internet was really helpful. And I'm also blessed with a really good memory. I made playlists year by year. What was I listening to? Okay, let's go. I'm 14 years old. It's 1973. What was on the radio? What movies were out? I made a playlist for every year and played it while I was writing. And it was amazing how the music could take me, just like people say to me all the time, oh, your music takes me back to this. Well, I think we all have that experience. So each year that I'm writing about, number one, I did not write about an experience unless I could remember it really well. There's plenty that happened that did not get written about. But if I had to remember it well, I had to be able to document it to the best of my ability, and I had to feel it. If I couldn't get the feelings onto the page, I knew that I would not have the book that I wanted to write. I wasn't trying to do this happened and then this happened and this. I wanted my readers to connect with me. I wanted me as a writer and my reader to be connected, for them to know what it felt like, because then I knew that I would have that connection. Not everyone has been in a band that makes it to the number one spot in the country. I wish everyone knew what that felt like, but everyone has known what it feels like to achieve something that you wanted, that you worked for. Everyone knows what it feels like to lose something that you've worked for and meant everything. Everyone knows what it feels like to have joy and exhilaration and to have their ego or their pride get in the way of themselves. Everyone has the same feelings. And I wanted to get on the map as a writer. I want to write more books. I want people to accept me as a writer. I want that credibility. So I knew I had to be honest, raw, real, authentic, all of it. It had to be that to achieve those goals. And I'm from Texas. We don't mess around. We just face the hard stuff and do it.
Cool, not too cool. Calm, not too calm. Carry me, right here. Carry me, right now. Informal, a loud continued noise or a mixture of sound. A state of disturbance, excitement, uproar. A loud noise made by people. A clamorous disturbance. A lovely term for a fuss or commotion, usually over something of little or no importance.
And I just want to make one comment about that. I loved your style, your matter of fact writing, but with the emotion, but also the fact that you were very clear in that these are your memories and that other band members, other friends of yours could have remembered these incidents differently than you. And I really appreciated that acknowledgement that everybody has that.
Yes. I mean, I think we've all experienced where you're like talking to your family. Remember that Thanksgiving dinner when Aunt Josie was there? And they're like, she wasn't there. What are you talking about? It's like, it can drive you crazy, trying to reconcile a memory that is so clear and vivid to you and someone else that was there has a different one. And it's enough to be crazy making. So everyone knows what that's about. And I did have to make that disclaimer, but to the best of my ability, I documented everything. I mean, I made sure I was right.
Yes.
Well, let me start with the introduction to the book. You dedicate it to your daughter, Audrey, and you have a quote that says, "I would trade anything and everything to be your mom. Pennies, sand, leaves, atoms." What are these items? What is this from? What does that mean?
It's so adorable. And I have letters from my daughter that go into the same sort of thing. So we just started this thing between us where we used to say, if you took every hair on every animal that ever existed from the start of time and every grain of sand on every beach and every leaf that every fell, and it would just go on with all these little things. And then we'd say, if you took all of that and it equaled 1 penny, then I would love you millions and millions of dollars. And if all those millions of dollars were one atom, so it just gets going more and more and more. Over time, it got to be so wordy and lengthy that we would just start shortening it to hairs, atoms, sand, whatever we could think of, any little minuscule thing that you could just So I hope that explains it.
That's really sweet.
That's very.
I think every parent has a version of that, with their kids.
She was 14 when I started writing the book. It took 3 years to do the book, and I took 8 months off because my dad, who readers of the book will know that I had no relationship with whatsoever, very minimal contact and very, very zero parenting. My dad came back into my life as I was writing the book and went through a series of health crises. That's when I got to know my dad. I navigated his end of life and medical things for 8 months. And it was such an intense experience and heartbreaking and heart healing all at the same time. But I didn't write my book in that whole time because I just wanted to cherish the time I had with him. And I think it's material for a second book, maybe. It's really sweet.
You must have a few more in you.
I have one more memoir in me, but there's a number of other books I'd like to write, short story collection, a few nonfiction things. So this is kind of what I want to do. I'll always do music. I'm a musician, a working musician whenever I can get the work. And I've been in bands nonstop for 45 years, which not every 61-year-old woman can say, or maybe even would want to say, which is another reason I wanted to write my book. I thought, how many female voices have this story? Not a lot. But I would very much like writing to be what I do from now on as well.
Did you sit your 14-year-old daughter down and say, I'm going to write this book. It's going to be honest. There are things that maybe we haven't talked about, but now it's going to be out in the open. I'd imagine based on your relationship with your mom, maybe it might have been open.
I'm a very different mom than my mom was. Very different.
That.
Actually, she knew I was writing the memoir. She saw me working. One of the first things I did, I read when you write, set up your space that you want to do it in. And I looked around my house. I'm like, I like being in the kitchen. So I just ditched my breakfast area, put a desk in there. And that's where I like to write. So she certainly saw me doing it, but she didn't really know some of the subject matter. And she was very young when she found out. She actually overheard me talking about something and was quite taken aback and was like, I don't understand. Why would anybody want to do this? Why would somebody want to open their life up to have strangers read about? And it was really a good question. It was very valid. We talked then about it, and we talked about why it's helpful for people to read memoirs. People realize that even though they've encountered difficult times, painful times, things that encompass shame and regret and remorse and the whole thing, it gives other people hope that they can still be successful and be loved and have families and good relationships. And I said, not everybody can or wants to write a memoir, but this is a story that I think I really want to and need to tell. And there's a very big difference between 14 and 17, a big difference. And she's a young woman now and very sophisticated and very emotionally stable and compassionate. And I think she's just very proud now of this book.
I was a latchkey off-brand misfit in a stone drag run down a low-rent duplex. A baby doll in knee-highs and dazzle boots, and a tomboy ride a stingray all the way to the pool. I found another good time girl out to make some fun. Be my sidekick fuck up. Yeah, fuck ups. We were fuck ups in training, both attracted and repelled by each other, like poles in a loser magnetic field. My new friend was off-brand, troubled, crazy, up for anything. First came the cigarettes, Marlboro Reds, the box smashed flat in the back pocket, cut off jeans, slick thigh-high. Then we got drunk together on Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill.
Did she know growing up years, her childhood, did she really get who you are and what you meant to so many people?
It was more like fun when she was younger. She got to come on tour a few times and the band would let her come out and dance on stage. And she's always been a dancer. So it was more kind of like a fun adventure. And then as she started getting a little older, I think she would get more of an idea of, I was just mom. But, teachers or her friends' moms would be like, oh my God, your mom is in the Go-Go's. I love the Go-Go's. So I think she started getting an idea as she grew up more. But the coolest thing was the show I mentioned at the beginning about the Hollywood Bowl in 2018, that summer. She was 16. And I think being at the Hollywood Bowl and seeing the scope of it and the beauty and the excitement of the fans and being old enough, I saw her after the show and she just looked like oh my God. And she just ran over and hugged me. And it was really cool because I could tell that it really sunk in that this was a very special thing that she got to be a part of.
Which leads me to, you said that Gina wasn't there, but that became your advantage back in the day when people weren't available to play for a show. Others had to step in. That kind of happened for you at the Whiskey when you met Charlotte at the Whiskey.
You're right. That's how I got my gig.
Someone was sick.
The original Go-Go's, and the documentary goes really in depth in their history. I think people really will love it. I thought everyone knew this, but apparently the director didn't think everyone knew this, and really talked a lot about how the Go-Go's were a very organic band that came from the punk rock scene of Los Angeles. So when I joined, they had 2 personnel changes in the time they'd been together. And right at that point, they were apparently kind of having a little inner conflict because Margot, the original bass player, wanted to be really, I didn't know any of this, by the way. Let me just say what I knew. What I knew was that, hey, can you fill in? Our bass player's sick. We've got 8 shows at the Whiskey. And I was like, yeah, sign me up. But apparently, everyone has different agendas and ideas for how it should sound, where it should go. And it's not uncommon that there's conflict and disagreements about direction and things. So they were having that. When I stepped in, there was something about the chemistry and the way it felt. And I was not new. I'd been playing in bands for 5 years. I thought I was a seasoned pro, and they had everything I had been looking for, because to me, they had great songs and they were selling out clubs. And I thought, even though I have more experience, this band is a notch beyond where I've ever gotten, in the music world. So I love the songs. I love the young women. I loved the way it felt. And I became permanent from there on. All of the prior members are in our documentary, so it's pretty interesting for
great.
people, I think. The director got the original drummer, the original bass player, Paula Jean Brown, who joined when Jane quit. I mean, it's all there. It's a pretty remarkable document of the entire Go-Go story.
All right, so we're talking with Kathy Valentine, and we're having a time of our lives, but we're going to have to take a break right now, and we will be back shortly.
Hey everyone, it's Tom and Zeus from Shout It Out Loudcast. We're here to take a minute to talk about something exciting happening with our podcast network, Pantheon Media.
As you may know, Pantheon has made a huge impact in the podcast industry, especially in the music category, bringing shows that not only entertain but also connect with listeners like you on a deeper level. Right now, Pantheon Media is raising capital through an SEC-certified equity crowdfunding company called Start Engine, and we couldn't be more excited about it. So much so that we invested some ducats ourselves.
This is a fantastic opportunity, not just for the company, but for us, the fans and supporters. By investing in Pantheon, you are backing a brand that believes in high quality storytelling, creativity, and innovation in the podcasting space. Their team is committed to amplifying voices that deserve to be heard, like KISS fans. And this capital raise will allow them to expand the network even more, bringing us new and diverse rock and roll content to enjoy.
So, if you're looking to invest in something that truly matters and connects with real people, check out Pantheon Media's Start Engine campaign. Join us in supporting a company that's reshaping the future of audio entertainment. Together, let's make some noise.
Head to startengine.com/Pantheon Media today to learn more and become part of this amazing journey. Thanks for tuning in, and keep shouting it out loud.
Welcome back to the What Difference Does It Make podcast. We are mid-talk with Kathy Valentine, with whom we are head over heels in love with.
First impressions are sometimes wrong, because in your book, you saw the Go-Go's when they were first starting out, weren't that impressed. You met Gina for a band, were not impressed, right? Is that correct?
Well, when I first saw them, they hadn't been together very long. And it was, like I said, I thought I was a seasoned pro. I'd even played in England in a band. I had played in London, I had been in Texas, where music royalty had given me a lot of support and validation from the Fabulous Thunderbirds to Doug Somm. So in my book, in my version of me, I was like full on legit. And when I first saw them, they seemed like they were still starting out. So it wasn't that I didn't like them. I just thought they were cute and like, oh, good. They got a ways to go. Cool. And when I saw them, I think it was even just a little over a year later, it was like, man, they had come full circle. And a lot of that had to do with getting Gina in the band. And she was like a taskmaster. She's like, we got to work. She's still like that. Everyone else is like, okay, let's get together and rehearse a few times before the tour. And Gina's like, no, we got to do it for a month. Not really, but, she's a taskmaster. It was to the band's benefit and still is to our benefit. Even after all this time, we just sound better if we've played together a bunch of times.
I think whatever you do in any business or just simply friends needs a taskmaster, someone who's always going to keep you on track.
I think so too. It's like you take on these little roles, don't you?
And you say you locked in with Gina instantly. I guess the amazing thing is you're a guitar player. Is that your preferred instrument? Guitar?
For a while, I would have said yes, but now I just think of myself as a musician, and they're just very different jobs. I look at playing bass, and really the Go-Go's is the only band I've played bass in. I usually play guitar, but in that band, it was really about being a supporting player and being that foundation that kind of locked in with the drums. I always felt like it was a really important part, even though your average listener might not zero in on the bass. I knew that if anyone did zero in, that I wanted it to be something that was impressive. So there was room for a lot of melodic bass lines and hooks even. There was room for hooks. And my upbringing in Texas, I knew what feel was. I grew up with not just rock and roll, but blues and R&B and country. And I understood components of playing an instrument that were ingrained in me. Like you got to swing sometimes, you got to drive sometimes, you got to leave space sometimes, you got to fill up space sometimes. So what makes you the player you are is recognizing when to do those different things and how to do it and what best makes the best song, what makes the other players sound their best. And I was good at all that. That's probably the basis of my musicianship. I'm not the most technically great musician on anything, but I have really good taste and I know I have good judgment about all those other things. And that's a really good lesson that I tell musicians, because a lot of musicians, they think it's just about going as fast and furious as they can. Then you're more like an Olympic athlete. Oh, look how fast I can play these runs or these scales. Yay, but what is that going to do for a song like Our Lips Are Sealed? You playing that fast going to help a great song shine.
You had a couple of themes throughout the book that you talked about, and one of them was the support of male musicians, always the support of male musicians, which I found really at first surprising when you mentioned it. And then I found it really comforting because you don't really find that in any other business.
It's true. And once I saw the pattern, it's not anything I ever thought about until I wrote the book. And as I was writing the book and I was writing about my experiences in Austin, and there weren't women to look up to. There was one woman, Marcia Ball, who played piano. She was from New Orleans, fantastic musician. But most of the other ones were singers, and nothing against singers. So I was entirely dependent on guys to give me praise or encouragement or support or validation. So it's nothing I noticed at the time. But as I wrote the book, I started seeing this pattern. And the pattern was that consistently the guys had been, and maybe they wouldn't have been if I wasn't so earnest. Maybe it was me. I don't know what was at the root of it, but I noticed, and as soon as I noticed it, I thought I'm going to make sure that my readers acknowledge this too, because you're right. You always hear about sexism and obstacles and the glass ceiling and of course all that stuff. Of course there's a patriarchy. Nobody's going to deny that. Even the guys I know don't deny that exists. But I really enjoyed being able to lift up the musicians and acknowledge and recognize and show my appreciation for the support I got. And I don't know if I would have given up or run off with my tail between my legs if I hadn't gotten it, but it's a possibility. One time a producer told me, I wrote about it in my book, he said, "You're not a lead singer. You don't sing well enough." And I took that to heart. I believed it. I believed it for a really long time. And it wasn't until 2005 that I thought, I don't care what he said back in 1989 or whenever it was, 87. If I want to sing, I'm going to sing. When someone you look up to tells you you're not good or you're not as good as you need to be, it can really be damaging. So I'm so grateful that I did not hear that. Like, oh, yeah, little girl, go off and play your guitar. You'll get nowhere with that, but go have fun. I mean, it would have been devastating.
Can you tell me a little bit about pre-South by Southwest Austin?
Austin had an amazing music scene way before it called itself the live music capital of the world. And what I really liked was the spectrum of music and this place, the Armadillo World Headquarters, where literally one night you'd see Ray Charles, the next night you'd see the Ramones, the next night you'd see Frank Zappa, the next night you'd see the Flying Burrito Brothers. My mom's friend worked there, so I had access. So I went there a lot. I went there with my mom a lot. We liked their nachos. So we'd go and sit in the beer garden, eat their nachos. We could just wander inside the concert hall. And I saw such a wide variety of music. And then in the clubs, I started hitting the clubs when I was a teenager, 16. And I write about this in my book. I have a chapter called Clubland because music was just it was like my college. It was like I felt like I was in school, and I would go see a rock band. They might be playing all covers, but I'd time it so I'd get to the Bowie covers set. They would do like, okay, here's our Bowie set. And the whole set would be nothing but David Bowie songs. And that would be fun. And then go see the Fabulous Thunderbirds. And then go see a troubadour, like somebody like Ray Wiley Hubbard or Jerry Jeff Walker, one of the three named Texas troubadours. And then you might go see a country honk band or Tejano. It was just so much music. So Austin was it was an amazing place to be a teenager. You know, nobody likes to think about aging and stuff, but I get a lot of consolation that I got to be a teenager in the 70s and I got to be a young, irresponsible nutball, not grown up in the 80s. That's the good side of my particular aging trajectory. Those were two great decades to be a young person in.
Moving through clubland. It's never dull in clubland. It's all going on. This clubland is mecca. Movies in real life won't keep us together. We play like our head. We got that turban, the other with the gold tooth. Right through that magic door. I don't wanna hump you. Oh, I might wanna be like you. At night I move through clubland with precise timing, like gears shifting from one place to the next. Catch the Bowie cover set at the Rock Club, head over to T-Birds and Antone's, finish up with some dancing at the Split Rail. School was in session, and it was the best education I could ask for.
Yeah, I agree.
I think everybody says that.
Well,
I'm
of
sure
cour-
the people that were teenagers in the 50s loved it too, but I'll take it.
We've talked about that before, about growing up in the 80s.
Yeah,
Being a teenager in the 80s was awesome.
actually, one of the most amazing pictures that you have in your book is not a picture of you or your family. It's the bill of what's playing at the Whiskey in 1980. I mean, it's insane.
Yes.
It was Susie and the Banshees, Susie Quattro, the Plimsolls with the Blasters, Captain Beefheart, the infamous X shows, and of course the Go-Go's closing out the new year.
I should just use that flyer as like, what do you call it? A one sheet on my book, because not only did Susie Quattro show me that, you know, I was like strumming my little guitar thinking that the only options were to be Joan Baez. No disrespect. Joan Baez is awesome, but I thought that was it. Folk singer or rock star, Janis Joplin. That there was nothing in between. You're either a folk singer or you're a rock star. And then I see Susie Quattro and I'm like, oh, you can hold an electric guitar and plug it in an amp and wear platform boots and have a shag haircut just like the Faces. Whoa, mind blown. So there's Susie on there. There's my friends that came up at the same time. We helped introduce the Plimsolls to some of them together. We were all hanging out at the same places, all trying to make it happen together. There's the X show where I meet Charlotte and she asked me to join. And then there's my shows that are my first, all on one flyer. It's amazing, that one.
How did you get into the Whiskey on that night to see X? I would imagine that was sold out. Did you have connections? How tied in were you?
Back then, all the bands played the same places. So you became friendly with the doorman. So it wasn't, you didn't have to be that connected or on a list or anything. If the doorman knew you were a local musician, that they would wave you in. So that night, it was Christmas night, which isn't the most busy night of the year. I had Christmas. My mom had come out to see me in LA, and I didn't even have a place to live. I was house sitting, and my mom came to stay with me, and she went to bed, and I was bored, and X is playing. So I just went down the street. I was living right up the street from the Strip. X was one of my favorite bands, so it's kind of a no-brainer. And I was always real independent. I mean, I was going out by myself all the time. I didn't need a girlfriend or a posse to go out and enjoy a band. So I knew I would see people. It was just a really fun time.
On the topic of your daughter, as I said, a lot of things that resonated with me. So your experience when you were 12, disclosing this to her and your non-traditional upbringing and just where we are in the world right now with young women, how they can't imagine girls being taken advantage of, allowing something, to happen to them. This isn't even part of their world. I'm sure that she couldn't even imagine that this happened to you.
Well, first of all, she's like that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen to 12-year-olds. And what Holly's talking about is that the first time I had sex, which I probably shouldn't have had sex, but I was with a 16-year-old that didn't care that I was 12 and didn't care about anything. And I was just an unparented, unguided, messed up, lost, confused kid who was probably desperate for any attention. Didn't have my dad in my life. So a textbook case, really. So that's the first time I get pregnant. So that's how fertile and unlucky I am at 12. That was a really hard thing to write about because, it's one thing to write about it in 1980, but here in 2020, we would have never thought that. But that constitutional right for a woman to choose and determine for herself, even though she's a woman, believe it or not, women should be able to choose and determine for themselves when they are going to become a mother. Well, now that right is in jeopardy. So I thought it was as difficult as it was. I'm not going to say I'm ashamed. I really don't think I had any option, but I will say it's like, I knew I was opening myself up to some very vehement and vocal anti-abortion people. And I was uncomfortable. I'm not someone that enjoys conflict or enjoys arguments or enjoys having to defend my position. That's not my way. I admire people that can take all that on. I just thought it was very important to put a human story and a human face on a topic that's pretty hot button thing these days. And things that women have taken for granted for many years are going away. And what makes me the most angry about that is that the people that have money are still going to make those self-determinations. They're still going to get access. They're going to find a way to terminate a pregnancy, the people with money, and the poor are not. The poor are the ones that are going to say, I can't even feed my family now. What am I going to do? And they're going to do something that could kill them, basically. So that's what really bothers me about that. It's not going to stop, just like, it's not going to stop abortions from happening if you take that constitutional right away.
When I was reading it and that you had to fly to California to get it.
Yeah, this was 2 years before Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, that didn't click at first. And I thought, why is she going to California? And now, we're experiencing it all over again.
And I really get it. I mean, I'm a mom. I looked at the ultrasound when I got pregnant, and I understand the emotional weight of this issue. I get it. I fell in love from the minute I saw that little tiny dot. But that's the difference. It's love. It's making that choice. I'm going to let my body nurture this little thing. I'm making that choice because I'm sober, because I'm financially secure, because I'm a mature adult. I'm ready for this. I want this. I can do this. I can love this child. I can give this child everything it deserves. That's what I just want to say. I get the emotional wallop because I've been on that side. I think ultimately you have to err on the side of personal self-determination. We all get one life, and no one has the right to decide for another person how they are going to try to pursue that happiness, fulfill their own destiny.
That's the bottom line. And I don't think anybody takes it lightly.
I can't believe where we are. Anyway, we don't want to get too happy and wait.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess.
So you have a question, Dave?
No, I know. No, I'm just wondering. I mean,
he's like, hello, there's a guy here.
No, I know when to back off. I was wondering, because of maybe the way you were treated during your adolescence, you always wanted to be in an all-girl band. Do you think that was like I need the sisterhood of a group of women. This is what I want. I feel strong when I play together with women. Is that how you felt?
I mean, I've played in bands with guys too. My first band was 2 girls and 3 guys, but I had this longing to belong. And I just felt like, I think at the beginning, I felt like as a beginner that guys wouldn't want me in their band, like, and that it would be easier. I mean, there were so many obstacles, and I had to figure out how to get an electric guitar, how to get an amp, how to rehearse, how to find people to play with. And I think it just seemed like it would be a different sort of thing, and maybe more, I could grow more unjudged, because even though I had the support of guy musicians, I feel like, I wanted other people to start out, and just all the guys I knew were kind of already doing it. But I think I have just always wanted to hang out with like-minded girls and just feel that sisterhood. Another thing I realized writing the book, how I just started from the minute I started playing music, I started this lifelong habit of kind of pulling another gal in with me and kind of, you're my partner. We're doing this together. And I mean, with the exception of Carla, who I started the Text Tones with, who she'd been playing way before me. But a lot of times I was the one pushing that, come on, we're doing this. And maybe I was afraid. Maybe I was afraid of putting just myself out there. So it's an interesting thing. I've had a female kind of just kind of partner that I write songs with and that I do it together with pretty much all the way up until making solo record, which I did one in 2005. And the soundtrack to my book is pretty much a solo record. And I really like doing it. I thought it was ironic. All I ever wanted was to belong, to feel a part of a family, to be in a band, to make it in the music business. And then I go have this fantastic experience all by myself, writing a book and making a record.
Did you play all the instruments on your soundtrack for the book? Is that all you?
Yeah, I had a blast. I wrote it all. I sang it all. I performed everything. I had a co-producer in New York, a great composer that was mixing for me and co-producing in that, helping keep me on track and bouncing ideas off of. Yeah, but I compiled everything and recorded everything in my home and had a great time. I was making beats. I had all these influences. I mean, I knew when I made my first solo album, that's when I never wanted to be a star. I never wanted to be a solo artist, but it gave me a lot of confidence in my abilities as a producer and as a musician. I'm like, oh, you're good, and I really believed it, because when you're in a band, a lot of your ideas, somebody will go, oh, no, I don't like that. And it can make you go, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. Or, oh, I don't like that song. But when you're doing that by yourself, for better or for worse, there's no one saying that's not good. You decide what's good enough. And you might write a whole song or record a whole song and then you decide it's not good enough, but no one's shooting down anything. And it was really good for my confidence the first time I did it. And doing this record, I was like, holy cow. I mean, I knew I was a good bass player in the Go-Go's. I knew I did a great job of that, but I would have never thought of myself as, somebody that could go play bass. I wasn't Gail Ann Dorsey, I wasn't Tal Wilkenfeld I knew that. But on this soundtrack, I was like, man, I played some really great bass. I played some great guitar. And I knew I was a good guitar player. I was proud of it. I still am really proud of it. And plus, artistically, it's just super innovative because I really capture the tone and the feel of the chapter. Like when I write a song to go with Camouflage, which is a chapter about a home invasion robbery where me and my 2 friends could have easily ended up murdered. And you have to read the book to read the story. It's really scary. And when I wrote the soundtrack to that chapter, I wanted to bring into the music the tension and the fear and how lost I was after that had happened, because that came right on the heels of the band breaking up. And I'm in this house on the Hollywood Hills. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. The Go-Go's have broken up. I'm completely lost, completely devastated. And now I don't feel safe in my home. The home I don't even know how I'm going to pay for. I don't feel safe and very lost. And I really loved expressing these things.
Hollywood Hills, August 1985. All-nighter, high heat. He's behind her, and there's something bad about to happen. There's something bad about to happen. How did he get to the top of Sunset Plaza? as your toe. Wild-eyed and sweat, shouting orders. All of you, get in here right now. Face down, on the shelf. Your ears are rushing, time is still. I can't think straight. Do something, move, obey, fight. Now I must secure you. Please don't hurt us. Now I must camouflage you. Camouflage, why? Immobilize, terrorize. Now he's found some butcher knives. I will not be easy to kill. I think we're gonna die on this hill.
And it's not all a downer. There's a chapter about getting raped. Oh, that's not a downer. No, that's a real, there's a chapter about being raped at 14, and that music is beautiful. It makes me cry. It makes people that listen to it cry. But then there's other stuff that's just rocking and fun and like just full of attitude. So I'm super proud of it. And I highly encourage people to listen to the soundtrack. If I had my choice, I would say listen to it after the book, but it stands on its own. The audiobook comes with the complete soundtrack along with underscoring that's not the soundtrack, that just goes with what I'm narrating. And it's super cool. I've gotten a lot of feedback from the audiobook where people are just blown away. It's almost like podcast because it's so integrated.
It's a sword and a bear. Begin in a blackout. The clouds parted, the sun found me in those vanished hours. Still in the game, I'm a tearaway, ricochet. Wake up in dreamland, do it the right way. Yeah, I'm in the game, I still got the shot. Gonna throw it from the bottom all the way to the top.
I thought that was such a great idea. I loved listening to it while I was reading.
Thank you.
Is that in your future now? I know there's a great filmmaking scene in Austin. Is doing soundtracks something that is on your radar?
I would give anything a shot. You know, I'm trying to make a living. So, yeah, I would give anything a shot. It's just, it's a challenge. Anything challenging and new. I was offered a part in a film in 2015 and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And they were like, no, I wrote this part with you in mind. I'm like, what? And I was terrified. And it ended up being one of my favorite things I've ever done. The film, I don't even know if it ever got distribution, but I loved it. And I was asked to be a keynote speaker and I was terrified because it's one thing to get in front of people and just have your guitar and be singing and rocking out. But it's another thing to stand in front of them and just be you. And sometimes people just don't like you. They just like, they're just like, I don't like her. They don't know why. And when you stand in front of a room full of people and talk, that can happen. So I was terrified of that. I want to be liked, but it was exhilarating. What I found was that I connected with people, which is what it's all about. So I would love the opportunity to do anything, really. I just like trying things out and doing them. And, I'm not going to do well at everything, but I've come to a place in my life where I don't have to be great. For a long time, it's like, I'm not going to do that unless I'm great at it. And I think that even kept me from writing a book for a long time because I didn't want to write a lame book. And I was afraid. And I didn't read a lot of memoirs. I read classic literature and that's intimidating. You're like, oh, I'll never be Flannery O'Connor. I'll never be Thomas Mann. And yet when I started reading memoirs, I was like, well, I have a story to tell and I don't have to be the literary brilliant genius of the 21st century to write a memoir. I have to be honest and a little bit literary and a little bit lyrical like I can do. And maybe I can do a good job of this.
I think you nailed it.
I do too. To be honest, I think
Good.
That's fine. Because what you were talking about, it made me think of you had the opportunity, or it never came to fruition, where you were going to audition for Light of Day, did go to Joan Jett. But then afterwards you said, I didn't want to act anyway. So it seemed like at that time you're trying to convince yourself, this is something I didn't want to do, but maybe deep down it was something that, you wanted to try.
Once I had the opportunity, I was like, yeah, I wanted to do it, but above and beyond anything, I'm a self-preservationist. And I've felt from the time I was a child, my job is to take care of myself. No one else is going to do it. That's my job. So taking care of myself means not wallowing in a defeat. That's what I'm going to do. And if I didn't get the gig, I'm not going to give up, but I'm going to spin it. I'm going to spin it where I can move forward. And at that time, the spin was, I don't want to act anyway. I want to be in a band. So it doesn't mean I didn't want to, but that was my device for taking care of myself and moving forward. I've had a lot of people say, you have had so much betrayal and so much abandonment, and yet you seem so open and forgiving. And they're kind of like waiting for this spiritual, and I'm like, yeah, because that's what's best for me. It doesn't serve me to hold grudges, to be full of resentment, to be bitter. That doesn't help me move forward. That doesn't help me grow. So as much as I would like to say I'm a saint who is just overbrimming with forgiveness and whatnot, it's really about how can I grow? How can I move forward? How can I do what's best for me? Being good to people is what's best for me. Caring about other people is what's best for me. When I was younger, I was a little bit more limited in doing what was best for me, like taking care of myself, paying the bills, playing my parts well, making sure I was showing up, and that was all best for me. Or as I've gotten older, a lot of what's best for me, besides taking care of myself physically, is taking care of myself spiritually. And the way I can do that is with love and compassion and forgiveness and gratitude. I sound like a motivational.
No, that's a
Stop. Hey, Brene Brown, move over.
We're going to use that in our promo. It's going to be Kathy Valentine, your new guru.
motivational speaker. I mean, is this something that you learned through your classes at AA when you did go?
It's just life and being willing to, sobriety is this foundation for everything for me. Sobriety is why I have a daughter, why I'm alive, why I pay my bills, why I am not sick, and why I don't look like I've been dragged behind a truck for 20 years. It's like sobriety is everything for me. But yeah, I'm not a religious person, so I had to start finding my spirituality and the ways that worked for me, and just being my age and being open and receptive to growing and changing and evolving.
It's funny because it's kind of like your song "Can't Stop the World." We haven't talked about any Go-Go's music at all, but I guess that was the first song you wrote with Carla.
That's my song. I wrote it before Carla.
Oh, before. Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about "Can't Stop the World." Where were you at the time?
I had been in LA. I'd moved to LA to make it. I moved with my best friend that was in my band, Carla. She was a lot more responsible, a few years older. So she wasn't moving from Austin to LA till she had her job lined up. Whereas me and my young friend, Marilyn, we just jumped in the Delta 88 and sped across the desert. And she promptly moved into a nice apartment with a friend and had a fake ID. And me, after going out to clubs for years in Austin, was in a city where you had to be 21 and I didn't have an ID. So I'm abandoned and I'm alone and I know nobody and I have no money. And I'm pretty damn bitter and unhappy in general. And yet, this is where I discover songwriting. And I had written a few songs. I'd been playing guitar since I was 15, and I'd written a few songs, but I was kind of more concerned with being a great guitar player. So I started writing songs, and the first song I wrote in LA was "Can't Stop the World," and it really melded my external situation with what I was feeling inside. And in my book, I write, that's where I really became a true musician, not because I could play the scales up and down the neck 20 miles an hour, but because I was able to make a musical expression out of what I was feeling and filter my external circumstances through music. So once I did that, I was off and running, and writing songs has been my go-to for many years. It's quite a therapy. But "Can't Stop the World," not only did my band, the Textones, do it, but the Go-Go's put it on the first album, which was wonderful for me because I was the last member to join. And that album easily could have not had any songs by me. Another song right after that, I wrote "We Don't Get Along," which was my very first cover song. A wonderful artist named Phil Seymour cut it. Mm-hmm. And Phil Seymour was a great singer. He sang backup with Tom Petty. He'd been in the Dwight Twilley band. People that know anything about some of the 70s and 80s music might recognize Phil and some of his songs. So I got my first cover song. Then the other song I wrote in those early days before being a go-go was "Vacation." And "Vacation" was a song that the Textones also recorded, a song that I showed Charlotte pretty soon after I joined the band. And she said, "Oh, this is a good go-go song. Let's make the chorus a little bit more fleshed out." So we sat down and kind of reworked it.
Charlotte was she the arranger? Did she have the best ideas musically, how to flesh out a go-go song, how to make a song a go-go song?
No, I think that was everybody.
Okay.
Everybody had ideas for that, but just I'm bringing her a song that we didn't write together. And I'm saying, I'm the newest band member. And I'm saying, do you think this would be good for the Go-Go's? And she's saying, yeah, but maybe just in her version. But that didn't mean all along down the line.
Right. Okay.
Was what she did. Just in that situation, when I showed it to her, that was her opinion of what the song needed. And so I think we have a really great course. But I still like the original too. It's got its own little attitude.
Do you play with the Textones, or what's your relationship with Carla and the band?
We're friends. I'm pretty much friends with everybody that I've ever known. The original Vacation just got licensed to a TV show. I forget the name of the show, but that's kind of cool. So even after all these years, we all got paid for the original version of Vacation. The second Vacation that I wrote with Charlotte, where we added a chorus, is kind of what's known as a derivative work, because it took an existing song and altered it. So there's two versions, and she's kept the Textones going for decades, and they have their own little niche that they've carved out. So yeah, I'm friends with them. I rehooked up with Marilyn from the Violators, my first punk rock band, through Facebook, and we haven't talked for decades. And it's pretty amazing to have these long ago relationships that, because of the internet and social media, can resurface.
Yeah.
That's funny. When you mentioned reconnecting with her, I assumed it was through social media, but you didn't. I don't think you specifically said it. I was going to say it had to be Facebook.
I was stunned. I thought she had died. That was the rumor. So I was stunned. I'm like, you don't want to say, I thought you died, but that's what I was thinking.
Oh, man.
And I've been back in Austin 13 years, but LA, I lived for 27 years. And those are the years where I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, part of my 40s. And those are the kind of friendships that are pretty solid. As a mom in Austin with a teenager, it's not like I'm making a lot of other mom friends.
The cover photo, which I love, the cover of All I Ever Wanted. Did Catherine Sebastian take that photo?
Yes. I'm sure she's credited on there. Yeah. I think I write in the book, she did photos and I looked at them, and it was like the first time in my entire life that I thought, oh, I'm pretty. Like, it was so wild. And I was 20 years old in that photo. And at first I thought, well, is this cheating to like put a young, and then my publisher, the person I was dealing with, the marketing person, was like, the book is about this period of your life.
Yeah.
It's not about you now. It almost would be weird to have a picture of you now when you're writing about an earlier period. And I loved how it's like looking back. So it's like I'm looking back on my life. It was awesome to reconnect with Catherine Sebastian. We had been in touch over the years, but to actually get to work together. And she sent me photos that I had no idea. And I had a great time just seeing how documented my life was back then by her. She's a great photographer, and I love the book. I think it's beautiful. If I didn't know me and I was in a bookstore, I know I would pick it up. I know I would.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's beautiful, and the cover photo I think it's very fitting of the book.
You're still close with all your friends. What has been the reaction? Any surprises from people that you're close to?
Well, most people want to know what the other Go-Go's think, and everyone likes it and is either expressed, oh my God, I didn't know all this stuff, or I'm so proud of you, or you did such a great job. So I've gotten great feedback from the band. A lot of Go-Go's fans have told me that they got it because they were curious about that part, but were surprised to find how much they enjoyed reading about my journey to that. And afterwards, I really didn't feel like the success of the Go-Go's and achieving that would have the meaning it did if it didn't have the context. If you didn't read and understand where I was coming from, there's no way my reader would understand how profoundly important it was to me and how devastating it was to lose it when I had finally found a way to belong and to support myself and take care of myself and make it in a band. But I have seen online a few grumblings from people going, why did she talk about this so much? Why did she talk about her mom? Why did she stop at 1990? So to those people, I would just say, I never set out to write the Go-Go's history. My job is not to document everything the Go-Go's did. And my job, the way I saw it, was to get on the map as a writer, to do a great job so that people saw that I'm a writer. She can do this. She can do this well. I like her voice. I want to read more. I want more. That was my job. So that's what I set out to do. Very few people have complained about that. A few people have said, why does it stop at 1990? And any writer will tell you, I mean, I wanted to adhere to the conventions of good writing. When I write a song, I'm not writing an experimental art piece. I'm writing something that you are going to hear and remember and be hooky. And it's going to have a verse and a chorus and a bridge. And that's what I'm aiming to do. So when I wanted to write a book, I wanted the arc. I wanted my protagonist, me, to be faced with obstacles that she overcame and then ended up a changed person. That was the arc. I thought I had a perfect arc. And I loved that it was the 70s in Austin, the 80s in LA, great eras, a lot going on in the world that I consistently touch on my journey and how the parallel of what's happening in the world and the context for what's happening. You know, the Go-Go's success was against a backdrop of Ronald Reagan and the country changing enormously and AIDS happening and being ignored by the government. And these were profound things that shaped culture and had an effect on everybody, not only growing up, but on the Go-Go. So I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do. And what I did not want to do was document everything that the Go-Go's have done.
I couldn't stop comparing myself to my old bandmates. They had success. I felt like a sucker. Still had some rock and roll composure. I'm a rock dancer. That's a sorry consolation prize. The bills are stacked, the credit got trashed. No more deposits, lost that go-go cash. Who would I ask for help? Nobody. Mom won the kid lottery. Dad's not so fatherly. You better take care of yourself. I was my own cheerleader. Could I tell you, dear Rita? Lift it up on the heads and shoulders. A minute spin to give a good impression. Go, go, go. One down, one up, womanship. Go, go, go. One up, one down, womanship. You might be a winner, but I'm a champion. Cheerleader. 2, 4, 6, 8.
So there was that feedback. And I've gotten a lot of feedback of people just saying, oh my God, it's so honest and so raw. But that's, to me, that's what a memoir is.
That's what I want.
You
Yeah,
know?
that's what you want to hear.
That's what it is. And you don't make yourself come out. You have to be unflinching looking at yourself and say, this is what I did wrong. And this is where I screwed up. And this is the way I behaved was shameful. You got to be willing to do that, or you have no credibility as a writer. And I'm someone that has taken creative writing classes. I've been a on and off college student long enough that I'm 2 classes away from getting an English bachelor's degree. So
Nice.
I know, and not to brag, but I'm an A student. So I know what the elements of writing are. Plus I've read every great book ever written. So that was my plan. And I knew I would fall short. In case this sounds like I think I'm the greatest writer. I knew I would fall short, but I knew what I was shooting for.
And how did your mom receive the book?
She said it was really hard for her. She said it was really hard. And yet she signed off on everything. I told her, do you remember when this happened? For your listeners, my mom, she got high with me. She had an affair with a teenage guy that was a friend of mine. She never punished me, never gave me any consequences for anything I did that was crazy or wild, whether it was hitchhiking around or getting picked up by the police for being passed out on the side of the road. My mom never had one retribution for me. So I was pretty much fending for myself. At the same time, she supported me in everything I wanted to do. I mean, anything and everything I wanted to do, she was there for me. She loved me more than anything, but she just wasn't equipped for parenting. That was not her deal. She was really going against her nature. But when you love someone, and yet it's not in your nature to be a parent, all you're left with is doing the best you can. So it was more important to her that I write the truth and then I write what happened than it was for her to look like this exemplary mom. That was more important to her. And people have said nasty things. I've heard people say, oh, your mom was terrible. She was a horrible person. And that is not how I portrayed her. I portrayed her with love, gratitude, and a lot of credit for my strength and resilience. But people are going to take away what they take away. And a lot of people are like, oh, you had such a traumatic childhood. And I'm just like looking at the big picture of childhoods and going, I wasn't sexually abused. I was not thrown in a closet and beaten with a stick. I wasn't shuffled from horrible foster care. And not to reduce or dismiss my hardships, but there's a lot worse things that kids go through and survive and triumph over. And I've had some people say, your mom is like the hero of the story. So people really are taking their own takeaway from it. And I'm glad, because just as I was talking about the elements to writing a story, a very typical element is to have a villain or an antagonist. In my case, it was myself. I was both the protagonist and the antagonist. And I did not want my mom to be the villain, did not want to demonize her. I wanted to say what happened. At the same time, I ended up very capable and resilient and strong because of that. I was lucky. A lot of the things that could have gone wrong didn't. You know, people react in different ways. I think my dad not being there was just as much a part of my self-destructiveness as was my mom not parenting me.
In the introduction, you also say to your mom that you were so much stronger and braver than you know. What is it that you saw in her that she didn't see in herself?
I saw her as fearless. She seemed fearless to me. What it was, in reality, it was reckless and irresponsible. But she pretty much did what she wanted her way, and the rules didn't apply to her. Now, sometimes that's a really bad thing. It still is. You got to take it. You have to pay it. The rules do apply to you. If you run up your credit card, you got to pay the bill. The rules apply. But in other ways, it was a good thing to think the rules didn't apply to me. I don't have to go to college right away. Why can't I get my degree when I'm 61? You know, why do I have to do it now? Why can't I go chase my dream and want to be in a band? So in a lot of ways, thinking that the rules didn't necessarily have to apply were a good thing for me. I had the sense to put some boundaries in there, whereas I don't know if my mom did, you know. He's just kind of across the board. I do what I want.
Yeah. Has she learned to live within the rules? No, in person.
Same person. I love her dearly, but the book really opened my heart to her. I have had a lot of resentment over the years, a lot of resentment. Not so much about how I was raised, but that she just didn't look ahead. She didn't take care of business. She didn't set up retirement. I just kind of started taking on the role of the caretaker. From the minute I was successful, my driving thing was, I'm going to get my mom a condo and I'm going to give her this money every month so she can go back to school and she can get her master. And I had all these plans for my mom, like how she was going to be happy, how she was going to be successful. And it's like a hard thing to swallow. I think probably parents go through it with their kids. I'm going to give you the best education and I'm going to give you this. And then sometimes the kid just goes off. And so it was a very reversed thing where I was and am the parent. And yet she's very independent and doesn't want a parent. So it's a dance. And I'm a real mom to a real child. And at the same time, I'm not going to do anything to make an 83-year-old person's life unpleasant. It's lonely and scary being 83. She's on her own. She's very independent, but I'm not going to throw her out on the street and go figure it out. I'm going to make sure she has everything she needs. So writing the book really opened my heart to her, which has been a wonderful byproduct because that's what you want. You do not want to be 60 years old resenting your 80-something-year-old parents. That's just not where you want to be.
The story about your dad, and I am sorry, we kind of glossed over it before, but the way you reconnected with him, I also found very heartwarming and very forgiving of you because you could have easily carried that to, anger and resentment.
One beautiful thing was I really felt like I didn't matter to my dad. From the time I was a little girl, I felt like if I mattered, he would come visit more. He married and raised his wife's 2 daughters. And I felt like they were a family and that I didn't matter. They were the ones that mattered to him. And yet when he died and I went to clean out his place with my stepsister, I found a folder and it had every letter I'd ever written him from the time I was a little girl. It had clippings about the Go-Go's. It was just like realization. Of course, I realized it in our talks at the end of his life because he was lucid and had his wits about him to his last breath. So we had many, many talks. But that was a very tangible thing that I could look at it and go, I mattered all along. I mattered the entire time. He just didn't express it or didn't know how to express it. Or maybe his wife didn't want him to, you know. It's bittersweet, but it was kind of neat to be, at the time I was 59, and to go, you were wrong. All this time you thought you didn't matter, and you did. He had saved everything.
Well, it's not too late to have that realization.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Nice closure.
Here I am again. Wah, wah.
No.
it's happy.
Yeah, for some reason I thought y'all's podcast was more like, I don't know, kind of like lighthearted and stuff.
Well,
it
it usually is.
It is.
So here Kathy Valentine comes along and we're like just plumbing the depths of everything. So anyway, sorry if I told y'all that story too much, but at the same time, I'm not a very superficial, small talk type person.
It's exactly what we wanted. This is
kind of like to get right into the real stuff. I don't want to talk about the weather, you know.
I think our listeners will want to hear the stories also.
Oh, good. And hopefully it's not a down. I think it is uplifting. Yeah, it's funny. I had to do a 80s guest VJ spot for Sirius for 80s on 8. And I've been getting so many people saying how much they love the playlist and stuff. And I had fun going back because sometimes I'll make up a playlist, but it's just all over. I don't focus specifically on one era. So I had a really good time doing that because music is with me every step of the way. Even before I'm a musician, music is what is saving me. Like so many teenagers, music was proof that there was a better world out there awaiting me than what was in my painful surroundings. And music soothed me and made me just exhilarated and expressed how I felt. So I talk a lot about music from the very beginning of the book. And so many people have told me when I would mention something, whether it was Maggie May or Sunshine of Your Love or In the Summertime, they'd go back and listen to that. Sometimes I feel like I should make not only the playlist that I listened to that took me back to each age, but what I write about. I think that could be a cool one too, because people have told me they really like doing that. You know, I write about Exile on Main Street and Ziggy Stardust and just so much music was there.
I love that you had given up smoking, but you took it up again because you wanted an introduction to Keith Richards. That was a great story.
My little brain was churning. Like, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say to Keith? And then I'm like, can I have a smoke?
Is that still in your will, though, that he gets the 62 Stratocaster?
No. My will was like me writing. I thought that's all I needed was to write it out. My will, my guitar to Keith. I mean, to me, that was a will. So that's what I told them.
You commented also about meeting Keith Richards, about speaking to some of the people that you worshipped or idolized, but you admired, and about how they're just people. So if you're going to converse with them, you want it to be organic.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of people come up to me and all they say is like, my first concert was this, or I was at Wolf Trap in Vienna, or I was here. And that's all they can think to say to me. I would never say that's not okay. That's fine. Say whatever you want. I like people. I like meeting people. But for me, if I met somebody, I want to like a little bit more of an exchange. I want it to be real, like something like an actual conversation. But at the same time, you don't want to go into too much detail and have them like be running away from you. But yeah, I think people they're just people, and why limit the conversation to just being a fan for me?
That's why I'm glad we had the book to discuss, because otherwise I would have just sat here. I promised Dave I wouldn't get all fangirl, but I am going to tell you that your songs are some of my favorite Go-Go songs.
Oh, thank you. I love hearing that. You know, I was in a band with two very great, really good songwriters in Jane and Charlotte. And I learned a lot about writing songs from them. And I think they got stuff from me too. So it's always nice to hear that because we had a lot of great songs. So any songwriter likes hearing that. So thank you.
And my fanboy thing is, first time I saw the Go-Go's was the Serious Barbecue tour when you opened for Bowie. That was Madness, Go-Go's, and Bowie. And that was a good intro. That was like my first big concert where it was just my friends. I didn't have, so it was spectacular.
I bet. Did you read when I wrote about that?
Oh,
Did you
yeah.
get to that chapter?
Oh yeah. I finished this whole thing this week.
That concert was a big deal because it had come after 8 months of a lot of problems. And, I was scared to death that the band was going to end. Then you get this opportunity falls in your lap to open for David Bowie at Anaheim Stadium. And so it was a very triumphant moment. And I loved writing about that. And I even found, how I describe how we start the set, but I described in minute detail because I found a cassette of it. I found a cassette of us doing that show. Otherwise, I wouldn't have remembered. We don't usually start with a cappella, This Town, where it's just a vocal going, this town, this town. So I had the tape and I was like, oh my God, we did that song so uniquely for that one show. And it was perfect because then I could write about it.
It's also nice to have YouTube because you were talking about the final show in Rio when the band's doing Head Over Heels. You can kind of see what you were describing, but you were loving playing the guitar. Just watching you, it looks like everyone else is just kind of holding it together, and you are so thrilled to be playing the guitar, and you are all over the stage.
So funny. I'm all over the place. In my mind, yes, we're going on. It's a new chapter. Because what I wanted a band that just went on, like the Stones, like U2, like, so many bands. It just album after maybe this one's a dud. So what? Then they come back with this great album. It's like, I just thought it would go on and on and on and on. So to me, it was just a new chapter. It was a drag that Jane left. I hated that she left, but the idea of it being over was not something I could comprehend. I was in denial that it was ever going to be over. So to be playing the biggest show we'd ever done, and I moved over to the guitar and we found a good bass player and it's all happening. And nothing pierced that denial. I mean, clearly you look at that video and it's not the Go-Go's at their peak, but it's hilarious because there's me like, oh yes, it is. It is funny.
But life should always be lived that way, right?
There's a thin line. I mean, it's like you can be like a puppy dog and get up every morning like with your tail wagging, thinking it's going to be the best day of your life. And then you can be in denial that everything's falling apart and be a jerk because you're just refusing to acknowledge anyone else's pain. So yeah, there's a line there that we figure out eventually.
We've taken up an hour and a half of your time. This is such a great journey that you took us on through this book. I loved it so much. And I recommend All I Ever Wanted, a Rock and Roll Memoir by Kathy Valentine. So thrilling to talk to you. We've watched you for so long, and you have no idea how much we were screaming when we heard that we're going to get to talk to you.
Well, I have to say I've done a lot of interviews, and I really enjoyed talking to you both too. So there's something that we all clicked really well, and it was nice for me too. So thank you for that.
Oh my God, that was so much fun. Can you believe we just talked to Kathy Valentine?
Has the whole world lost its head yet?
Would you like to take that back, Holly?
No, the whole world is losing. Has the whole world lost its head because we got to talk to Kathy Valentine?
Agree. No, I love your pun. It's good.
We were so lucky to be able to talk to Kathy Valentine about her book, All I Ever Wanted.
A rock and roll memoir. And indeed it was, and quite a journey. So we highly recommend picking up this book.
You will not be able to put it down.
We didn't. We literally, we did because we had to eat and sleep, but we got through it really quick, and it's a wonderful read, and it's honest, and as I'm sure you got from listening to this podcast, she is genuine and the real deal. So thank you so much to Kathy Valentine, and until next week, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.